Chili here with Serious Dallas Moon, and okay, this is a Mercury hour. I was just watching this, which I would have thought it's a clickbait if not for the number of views, because it literally says that the 2026 beauty standard is big noses, and she also shows like not surgery noses as a thing. Now, it's very funny. It's very funny because, first of all, I think I probably, okay, going to remove that one a little bit. And I don't know if I have, yeah. So this is my nose. Um, that is the familiar Renaissance nose. And I call it Renaissance nose because, okay, Dan, I'm not really, not really fit to camera right now. Um, and the reason I call it Renaissance nose is because during the Renaissance, um, there were ladies that wanted to show themselves that had wealth and power, and also men. They wanted to have the painter that paints their faces paint them with the bigger nose. And some ladies that wanted to look feminine asked to make like a nose job, um, but this was actually showing off a person with a prominent figure or a warrior. And in the last, when there were the trafficking campaigns, then there was a shit ton of pressure. Also in academia, the guy that wanted to traffic me. I mean, to me it was just like weird, but he wanted to traffic me, and he had nothing to pinpoint because Larry Loudon was my theoretical framework, and he was reading Larry Loudon for like heuristics, and if he would say I'm stupid, that would be. um, and so he couldn't pick on my intelligence. He couldn't pick on anything basically, and so he just picked on my nose, and and so and then I had this huge pressure to try to change my nose, and I'm like, there was so many campaigns to try to make me do a nose surgery. Now, here's the thing. Um, right now, and it comes as a big surprise to me because when people were hating on, I actually did a video about it because when people were hating on basically Jewish mafia, and mafias are always linked to intelligence, particularly if they're Gladio, they were hating on the big nosed people. And I was like, well, let's address the actual issue, addressing all the real, things that could happen in lineages, um, that could be literally showing on our faces. So it came as a complete and total surprise to me that the actual beauty standard is basically a nose that didn't have a nose job, and those noses will usually be not so straight or um, not really symmetrical, um, somewhat big, and like normal noses. I mean, unless you're Mormon. Then you get the Mormon face, and then which is so highly symmetric. But this is really a surprising thing, and I was wondering about noses and astrology. First of all, Mars and Jupiter apparently rule noses and the second house. So I have a second house Aries with Mars ruling also over Saturn and Jupiter. um, and I have Chiron in Gemini with the ruler Mercury in Aries. Although Mercury rules small things, and my nose is not small, Chiron rules kind of like a wound, And with the ruler in Aries, that wound could be seen on a person's face, in the details of a person's face. Um, so, yeah, 22 Mars, which means warriors. Second house Aries also. Mars is associated with our bloodline. 22 Mars is warrior. Um, now, um, there are many other things that can denote warrior. Let's say Aries 10th house, um, Saturn in Aries, like placements in Aries, and so on and so forth. And by the way, because I'm warrior, I did not actually did not go to mandatory RMA because I was shit fuck suicidal, and there was sexual harassments going at the army. Um, I was not doing that by myself. My parent arranged that, and he said, "Over my dead body will my daughter go to the army." And I actually, by the way, I talked about that. Um, Basically, what would happen is that I would use that weapon to kill the entire unit if there would be harassment, and I would be, Anyway, you got how it fixes out with not having done military service. Um, so, and yes, it was to do with not wanting to be in a position where there are orders that one just have to obey, and because the orders are coming through torture, then I would not even have the ability to disobey legal order. Like, only now I understand that. Um, yeah, for me, I was just not fit to be combat soldier, and everybody were dodging the intelligence by thinking French instead of Arabic. So it was like dodging elite units. Well, Prisoner X shows that there's a reason to that, because he was 8200. Anyway, Aries rules the face. Second house rules the face at Aries. Second house. So that would probably now my there is a Uranus. Jupiter also rules the nose, and my Jupiter has Uranus in it, which means somewhat unusual nose. Jupiter in Saturn is the bone structure, which gives us the Renaissance nose, or what people call the big noses. I address the darker aspects of such lineages in the past, and I addressed my um, relative distance and relative proximity, um, uh, as far as I know. By the way, yeah, don't when how should I say that? Don't go to have your blood tested just like that, even in the HMO. It's something that I learned the hard way. Um, and so, yeah, I also have iron depletion. My Mars is 22 retrograde in Scorpio. Um, Chiron can give a wound around iron. Chiron in Aries tropically can give. Okay, ruler of Chiron in Aries could be a wound around iron. I don't know which cells because Mercury would give us the detail, but I don't know to tell. It can be blood-brain barrier. It can be because Mercury is like the door. Um, Jupiter is associated with the liver, which is about filtering the blood. Falcon. This is not a medical advice, okay? Okay, it's not a medical advice. It's stuff you can check up on Google when you look at the body parts ruled by astrology. Now, I'm a holistic health practitioner. That being said, um, I'm not giving I'm not giving medical advices to people. Normally, I would need to work with conventionally trained practitioners, but because we're living in like paperclip Nazi Holocaust times, then then I can't say that we can trust doctors. So that was so funny. So Mars here on Deneb Algedy perhaps is changing the fashion, but or this is the time where I see the message, but we had an eclipse with Venu Rahu, and Venus is beauty standards. Jupiter actually rules noses, and the moon was with the sun at 28 degrees Aquarius. So for me, this is really exciting because it kind of like my insistence on not having a nose job. And by the way, one of the reasons I insisted, it was so that um, it's literally one of the most, because it's a surgery to the bone structure. It requires to literally change the bone. And I talked with women that did that surgery. They were literally not breathing well for several weeks, which is another thing to be considered is that it would not be safe for me to undergo any medical procedure because I could get kidnapped and forcibly addicted to drugs because of the nature of me saying no to corruption since childhood. They already tried to assassinate me through toxins. This is kind of like the exciting things to tell the children. Why did they try to do that? Yeah, I didn't agree to, do stuff to children. What stuff? Forget about it. Forget about something you don't want to know. Anyway, I didn't agree to do that, and that's why I was targeted as a researcher. um, and so, in the aftermath of all of that, where it was kind of like, hey, the thing that would like change my face, and I even remember that I looked at those face changing apps, and basically I was trying to look at my nose and I was trying to alter that, and I was like, well, actually, it's more compatible to my face. It's weird, but it's more compatible to my face. And yeah, what can I say? So after all of that, really, really challenging, challenging topics. Um, it is. I literally had to. Nobody prepared me for having to fight to not do a nose surgery, knowing that this is also considered the big noses, um, and, and Jews are being targeted because of the Jewish mafias, which I talk about in other occasions. Um, so it's kind of like, what can I do? I just have to surrender the fact that I have a big nose, and then this beauty standard comes in, um, which is really, really fascinating because this one it hasn't been an internal struggle, um, in as much as, because let's say I think noses can be contoured, but it hasn't been an internal struggle, particularly not. I remember when we were in Europe and I was just, going to the bathroom at the gas station. And yeah, we were traveling through with our car, and there was this guy who was asking me, "Where you're so beautiful." He was trying to probably was trying to sell me something, so he was flirting. I was like, "You're so beautiful. Where are you from?" And I told him, "Yes." And he says, "Britain." I said, "No." He says, "Italy." I said, "No." And he tries to guess all of the places, I guess, where there could be, you know, big noses. And then I tell him, like, "Well, I'm Israeli." And and he was like, "Oh, wow." Uh, so um, so I was just, receiving the kind of like the perception that it's not that bad. um, and I call it a Renaissance nose because I have I am warrior. It's not like I want to be a warrior. It's necessity. But the funny thing is, nobody prepares you for the fights you'll have to fight to just keep your big nose as is. And Mars then Algedy is literally kind of like, okay, now that's a beauty standard. I said we are in Renaissance o'clock. I did not predict it to be this. So this was, because, and by the way, when they try to traffic people, they try to diminish the value of a person, and particularly around appearance, because they want people to be dependent on the so-called clients for compliments on their beauty or on their body. Um, and I was just, loving on myself. Um, and kind of like having these Venus standards, which was really, and it was really bullying. Um, and now to have that as a beauty standard is kind of like, you know, after all these really tremendous bullying I went through because of my warrior nose. And it's kind of like, well, that's a Renaissance nose for a reason. Like, I actually had to stand to the trafficking in both the common people and the elite, and the uh, unattainable beauty standards that usually were achieved by surgery because that was marketable, while I was literally fearing the ritual abuse trafficking that happens in hospitals. And it's not just Giselle's case, but it's also, what is the woman I spoke to this day, where I see her about to shoot crystals, and the issue was not that she was addicted to crystals in as much as that she was literally tortured and trafficked. And the crystal was just to make the pain go away for when they traffic her, um, basically as slavery, which is sex slavery, um, and that is, yeah. So nobody prepares you that, um, you know that behind that big nose there's a big war, um, over values of sovereignty. And let it be said, there may be people that have forcibly gone surgeries, or that not forcibly gone surgeries, and are great warriors and so on. It's not about every warrior is going to have a particular nose, um, but this is definitely something that I can say, where Aries is my second house, which rules values, and it rules the face, and Mars 22 is big war. Okay, it's um, and by the way, just because of that, then it wasn't in any traditional setting. Not intelligence, not military. I know I do readings that cover NATO. I don't get dividends for that or anything like that. Um, and but it's just something that came about with my Pluto square, Neptune square, and Uranus opposite my Mars, which was water expands upon cooling, and then the aftermath was many things. For example, this NATO chart and other things I tended to. So yeah, that's my big no story. Whoever made that the trend made this going trendy is something that I cannot explain to you how much struggle people that have big noses have. And again, of course, if you don't have like a big nose, and it really is unattainable. It's not something. Okay, as this lady explains here, for 2026, and yeah, this big nose is really unattainable. And by the way, this happens in the aftermath of me doing a talisman of Venus in the first decan of Pisces, which one of the perfumes that Tony Mac did was emphasizing on loving our weirdness. So I did a Venus talisman that was in this decan, and these themes just showed up. I wasn't setting an intention beyond capturing Venus in Pisces, but then these things just showed up, and now I see this becoming a new trend. Of course, according to Christopher Warnock, if we consider how magic works, he says he's also doing talisman. He said, I don't know whether it was just the spirit of the time, or for me to do that talisman, or it's that talisman. And anyway, that is an art, and I capture it with art with the stars. Um, and I'm really also thankful for the celebrities that insisted on not having a nose job. And mind you, that was probably insisting. That was probably something that took, I don't know how did they even manage to, because they forced so many things on people, including sex change, by the way. Um, so big shout out. I saw there's Sabrina Carpenter. I don't. How should I say it? I don't know. I don't know too many celebrities. Okay, but really big shout out to the people that took the privilege of choice that they had about this, and um, and didn't go through this beyond inhumane surgery, um, and that is, um, and for the people that did, I don't know, succumb to the pressure, or just wanted to have, a different nose, like that's way cool. And even if people like regret that they did surgeries or something like that, like, okay, I mean, that's just life, and that's something that's in the past. Um, and I can say of how difficult it was for me, how much pressure was put on me to try to do that surgery, how much bullying, how much it was associated with trafficking codes. And nothing prepared me that I would fight this fierce war to maintain my nose as is, which um, so yeah. So this is something that I find um, actually really cool. Having and by the way, Venus Rahu both exposed the fashion industry's involvement in trafficking people. And by the way, those nose surgeries are really a part of that. Um, because, they change somebody's face and then they change somebody's weight and then, listen to Annika Lucas to find out what's next. Because this is what happens when these. And so this Venus Rahu ruled by Jupiter is basically new beauty standard about noses. That beauty started being unusual. Jupiter ruled by the moon and sun in Aquarius at the time of the eclipse. Aquarius is standing out of the norm, and it's also the Saturn that is outside of the structure. So it's unusual symmetry, but it's not that unusual, but it is unusual symmetry with the fashion standards and Venus's standards and fashion. So it was a fated fashion choice, and for me, it just means that my choices to my choice to practice my choice and my privilege of access to choice in as much as I have it was actually having a little bit of a win, even if it's just a fashion thingy. It's not just a fashion thingy. Those things were used to traffic. Those things were used to traffic. Those things were used to change somebody's face. Those things were used to get people to be traffickers, which I addressed with. One could compare, let's say, Maxwell to Detru, or Maxwell to Epstein to Alandra, with a different being that one managed to get out and the other ones didn't. The other ones couldn't tolerate the torture and complied um, with as children, as it cannot be even said complied, because when they're tortured to loss of sense of self, um, and so many people died on the way, and many people lived and tell the stories as survivors, which usually do not get a lot of reach. Um, yeah, so I know people want to focus a lot on these aspects of choice, but um, a lot of it has to do with whether you have a place to stay, or whether you have, this one person that is not, um, for some reason, is not compatible with the trafficking agenda. Okay. Again, they didn't get my mother to sell me as a child, and because my mother suffered herself from even prescribed any sort of even headache medication, then she would understand um, when those things were not compatible with her daughter as well. And by the way, even I did not understand, because I was just saying that something has weird side effects, so it's not compatible with me. And then I was told that I cannot have housing because I don't take drugs. And then there was attempt to assassinate me with something that was supposed to be prescribed drug. Um, and this is yeah. So a lot of these steroids, for example, if I take a case of Marc Dutroux, if Marc Dutroux would be administered, let's say, psychiatric drugs and torture, then both the drugs and the torture would make him to commit offenses. Um, and not all drugs are traceable by blood test. But if those crimes were committed for the elite, then yeah. And I'm saying Marc Dutroux because um, very likely when I was less than 9 years old, when they tried to kidnap me, I'm a half Israeli, half Dutch, so it was very likely the death row more than the Epstein's. So that was, and yeah. And then when I asked myself how to actually prevent those things, and I myself did not have children, then what is the core issue behind those things? Um, and this is how they also create terror, crimes against humanity, and so on and so forth. Like I said, um, and so there's a lot behind that nose. And I had to fight, and here's the thing: when one has to fight, we even lose contact with our femininity because it's not safe to be vulnerable, it's not safe to be empathetic, it's not safe to be feminine. And I had to fight to include me being a woman, which is why, and a lot of the targeting is also forced sex changes. And again, if somebody, and this is why we need to have it safe being a woman and safe being a man before we can talk about um, not before, but at the same time we're talking about LGBTQ, because there's so many experiments done. There's so many experiments done. There was a time where I felt like I have no gender because I was undergoing so much and it was so unsafe to be a woman. And then just to try and see, I was just trying to wear girly things, and immediately I was, you know, I wouldn't say harassed, but I can't say not. I was harassed as well. So I was like, okay, is being a woman in society that difficult that it could be that my my so-called non-gender is because it's not safe to be a woman. And but again, um, and I also grew up, because I was a single daughter to a single mom, so I grew up with warrior wisdom, and I didn't grow up with warm, empathy, loving hug, and so on. I did grow up with if somebody harms you, harm them so bad they wouldn't even think to do that. And I did not listen to that advice even as a child because I was like, wait a second, there's something else here. Um, um, yeah, but this is also how behind a certain look or behind a certain upbringing, um, there can be a lot of things that already pertain not just to the face, but also to not to the point that I couldn't be a woman in my society. I was accepted because I was manlike. I was accepted because, you know, if something ain't right, I'm not with it. you know? And this goes also to the beauty standards. Whereas women that were growing to be groomed as only the feminine, or men that were growing to be praised for, the empathy, the warmth, and so on and so forth, then they sometimes were growing up. I know for women that they were growing up that if they get mad, if they get angry, then they are hysterical. Well, as where I get mad, it's like a man get mad, okay? um, and I kind of knew that I had to even have the voice of a man when I get mad, because that's actually deterrence. But speaking the truth, that fucking worked. Somebody comes. I was one time I was walking from work to home in the evening, and then some weird guy approached, and I see that, and here, that person probably was some sort of neurodivergent or mind controlled or something like that, but he was harassing, and then I turn around and I scream like a madman. and he got so scared, and I ran the fuck out. and this, and so this also creates a life for most of the life. You're not thinking about, how to make a man stay, how to do. In fact, the relationship advice when I was trying for actual relationship advice is like, okay, what prevents me from committing? So, yeah, like I said, um, I guess different people were having different upbringings, but there is just interesting to have an authentic conversation. Now, Chiron is also around Aries, which is exactly these topics. Okay, exactly these topics. I know there was something that was trending of I was a tomboy because it wasn't safe to be a girl. Again, and I have to admit, I'm not sure if I was a tomboy because it wasn't safe to be a girl. Um, but the fact that it wasn't safe to be a girl in itself it's like a C factor that needs to be removed from the equation so that we can even talk about authentic gender. Um, Big spoon or little spoon? Little spoon.